kick it off.
All right, thanks, Kim. So aloha, everyone. Thank you very much, as always, every month for joining us for our College of Engineering Leadership Seminar Series, hosted and sponsored by Ken and Donna Hayashida and the Hayashida Ohana. So we're always very much appreciative of their support of our efforts in providing other forms of education experience for many of our students and our alumni and our engineering community out there. So mahalo to the Hayashidas and mahalo to all of you for joining us today, especially as people continue to join us online. Just very briefly, next month, we're going to have a little bit different format as we're going to be trying to go back to a in-person and hybrid forum. So we'll get you more information on that, especially at the end. But, today we're super excited about having our guest speaker here today. Tiffany is with Elemento Accelerator, with whom she's been with for a while, and I'm going to let our ESAs introduce her. But, Elemento Accelerator has been a big part of our innovation and entrepreneurial ethos here in Hawaii for a number of years, and Tiffany has been a part of that growth of Elemento in supporting many local and mainland companies in really addressing many of our local issues, as well as issues that our nation faces as well, especially in sustainability, energy, and traffic and agriculture. So, they're really kind of getting out there. And so we're very appreciative to have Tiffany join us, and we're excited to hear what she has to say. And I've gotten to know her over the years, and it's always nice to see the kinds of work that Tiffany and her staff at Elemento is doing. So I'm going to turn over to, I'm not sure if Elizabeth or Adam, but take it over.
All right, thanks, Dean Morioka. So hey everyone, my name is Adam, and with me today is Ellie, and we're going to be your moderators for today's session. So we'd like to welcome everyone to the Leadership Seminar Series of October, presented by the Hayashida family. So we'll start off by introducing Tiffany to you.
So at Tiffany's current position as Director of External Affairs at Elemento Accelerator, she works to weave together a network of mission-aligned partners who share a vision of a clean, vibrant, equitable Hawaii, helping to guide and develop the next phase of collaborations in Hawaii and beyond with the corporate, education, and startup communities. So prior to Elemento Accelerator, Tiffany led the marketing at Rehab Hospital of the Pacific Foundation in Honolulu, and for the Financial Services Institute of Australasia in Sydney, Australia. Prior to Elemento, she worked closely with clients across all major sectors in Hawaii at Anthology Marketing Group, from sustainability to political to retail. She's an active member of several educational boards, including chairing the Hawala School and the Hawala Foundation for Education boards. She is a board director for Hawaii Kids Can and Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration degree with a concentration in Operations and Technology Management from Boston University in Massachusetts. Outside of the office, she loves to travel, eating at new places, and watching surfing and college football. Now we'll have Tiffany begin with any opening remarks that she'd like to share.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Adam, Ellie, and Brennan. It's been so fun, collaborating with UH over the past few years. This partnership has been really key into just grounding us, in our work around Hawaii and the opportunities we have for innovation here as we look towards a clean energy future. So looking forward to this conversation, and thanks again for having me here today.
All right. Do you have any other further things to say, or should we hop into the question?
No, I'll turn the mic over to you, Adam.
All right. Sounds good. So for audience, for the rest of this seminar, we're going to have a Q&A session with Tiffany. So if you have any questions for her, please feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll get to them as time permits. So,
Okay, so first question. How important is it for Elemento Accelerator to support local innovators and entrepreneurs? Do you also look for diversity in company leadership makeup in terms of underrepresented groups and women-owned companies?
Yes, that is a great question. And it's a big yes to all of the above. Actually, if you were to look at Elemental's team a few years ago, it was predominantly female. So we always said that we had to look at diversifying our team in the opposite direction. Now we do have more males on the team, so don't worry about that. But I think diversity is probably one of the most important pillars in the work that we do. You know, we really say that at Elemental, we work at that nexus of social equity and innovation. And I think the only way to really be able to, you know, solve for a lot of the problems that we're up against, especially around climate, is to be working in communities. And, you know, to be able to work in communities, you really need to understand what those pain points are. So having the diversity of thought from, you know, all levels of the ecosystem and the community are really, really important in solving, you know, a lot of these big, hairy issues that we're up against today. So when we look at, you know, cohort companies to bring into our portfolio, how diverse their team is, how diverse their board is, how diverse their vendors and suppliers are absolutely all aspects that we take into heavy consideration.
Wow, thank you. It's so exciting to know that diversity is really important to you guys. And I feel like as we innovate and we try to come up with these new solutions, it's super important to think about everyone that it's affecting and how everyone can also benefit from this.
Yeah, we agree with you there.
All right, so the next question is, with your experience at Elemental Accelerator working in startups, what do you look for in entrepreneurs' kind of like DNA, and kind of more important, like what kind of leadership in the companies that you are supporting do you look for?
Yeah. I think, you know, as an accelerator, we're working with a lot of earlier stage companies, right? So it's a really long learning journey. A lot of the entrepreneurs that, you know, come into this space don't actually graduate college or, you know, like go into the world thinking like, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be a founder. Of course, there are those that are, but a lot of times it's really people that just have really great ideas or see problems that they're like, oh, I think I have what it takes to solve for it. You know, so at Elemental, we really exist to help those founders and entrepreneurs be able to create successful businesses, right? And there are a lot of different aspects to that. So some of the things that we look at in entrepreneurs are like, do they have that fire in their belly to really keep it going? Because this is a really hard, you know, nut to crack with a lot of the issues that they're working on. And also, are they coachable? You know, like these are people that we're bringing into our kind of like our Elemental Ohana, and we, you know, put them in rooms with the other 100+ founders that we have in our portfolio. So like, how coachable are they? How easy do they feel like they'd be to work with? Do they prioritize, you know, equity and diversity and inclusion in the way they think about their work? And those are really key things that we look for.
That's really awesome, because like you mentioned that, oh, you know, not everyone over there goes to college or, you know, has like gone through college. So it's really cool to see that there's like an avenue for people to, you know, be very successful and not having to go to college, because it can be very expensive, time consuming, and sometimes, you know, it's just not for everyone. So having that different avenue of success is really, really encouraging to just hear about. And I like the community. Or you had said there was like 100+ people who they talk to, that just that kind of knowledge, you know, passing down that knowledge is really, really impressive to see. And yeah, so this company, our Elemental Accelerator, is seems very, very cool.
Thanks. And I'm happy to share a little bit more about just Elemental in general too, if that's helpful.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Yeah, so we started about a dozen years ago out of, what you call the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. And that was when Hawaii became the first state in the nation to legislate our intent to flip our economy off of fossil fuels. But at that time, one of the things, like after we made basically that pledge, that we saw was missing was the technology aspect of it, right? And so when we first started out, we were supported by Department of Energy and some other folks that helped seed some really meaningful funding to help commercialize and scale technologies that could possibly help us in this energy transition. But in the first year of deploying, these like $1 million grants out to companies, we were seeing that there was something missing because it wasn't quite working. A lot of the ideas were still staying like in the R&D and lab phases. And so our CEO, John Lippert, who you might have signed up for this talk because you thought she was going to be speaking a couple of weeks ago. But anyways, she basically took a pause and went around the rest of the continent to talk to anyone who would talk to her about applying what we call the accelerator model to climate technologies. And, climate technologies can also be known as like hard tech or tough tech, because it's not just having like a software solution where all you really need is like a programmer and a computer, right? Usually there's some type of hardware component, and it can be as small as your phone or as big as like a small house or a small like dwelling. And so when it comes to climate technologies, from the investor standpoint, it's seen as riskier because the CapEx or like, the funding that's needed to really help it to come to market is typically a lot more, right? And so, when she was talking to people about this idea, they're like, oh, you're crazy. Like the reason why accelerators work is because it's like lower costs for people, to run the program. But it came back to Hawaii and did it anyways. And we've been iterating on ourselves for the past dozen or so years. And one of the things that, we know is needed to help make startups successful is really the community and the services that Elemental and others in the community like UH can help build to make them more successful because they have a stronger foundation. So we support companies not only on like the business and startup 101 side of things, but also with policy, with workforce development or education opportunities through internship programs that we have, through, diversified funding, and coaching mechanisms that we can share out. We help by introducing them to like our broader network of other investors that are also supporting this space. So there's a lot of things that go into helping to make startups in this space successful. And a really big key is, the partnership and the community support that wraps around all of it. So that's just a really brief overview of us. Oh, and the sectors that we work in are really broad. So we take a really holistic approach to how we tackle climate change. So we started off with energy about a dozen years ago now, but soon found that, energy is really connected to all of the other things that we interact with on the daily, the systems that we interact with, like food and agriculture, water, transportation and mobility, and, just buildings and industry or their circular economy. So our portfolio is made up of soon to be 150 companies because we're going to announce our newest cohort in a few weeks here. But they're really broad in the solutions that they bring to the table, and they come from all over the world. So yeah, happy to follow up on anything there as well.
Thank you for sharing about your company. Do you have like a favorite kind of part of your job or like the work that you do?
Yeah, I've been at Elemental for about 3 years now, and I think the community aspect of what we do is something that, we are going deeper and deeper into. And that's one thing that I feel like is really interesting about my role, especially being here in Hawaii, because Hawaii is actually leading the way in a lot of, these climate initiatives, from policy all the way to like project deployments. And a lot of people don't realize all the things that are happening. And, we always say technology brings half the solution, but community brings the other half. And I truly believe that Hawaii is a really great place to basically prove out a lot of these things and create a model where hopefully like other island states or countries can replicate it. And so that's what's really, really, I think, exciting about my role and the work that we do at Elemental.
Mhm. Yeah, that seems very exciting that Hawaii, because it's such a, kind of a small state compared to all the rest of the world, but the fact that we're kind of like leading the way in terms of this energy and climate, these things, it's very, very exciting, kind of like, encouraging, I would say, for someone like me, because I'm, come from Hawaii. There's not necessarily as much resources as the mainland, but we're still doing great things. Just there are great people that come out of Hawaii. There's great technologies that come out of this place. So it's just very, very encouraging to see all that's being done.
Yeah, and we inspired California's climate pledge.
Mhm.
So they took Hawaii's lead in when they drafted, like their legislation and intent to be more renewable. So there's a lot of impact that Hawaii has in terms of climate. So it's something for all of us to really be proud of, but continue to just like press on.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So going back to Elemental Accelerator, you're talking about how you guys take on a holistic approach to climate change. That actually kind of reminded me of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Do you mind speaking a little bit more of that? Because I find that super interesting how all of these issues are interconnected. And once we focus on one thing, like a whole bunch of other issues are also improved. Yeah, do you mind sharing?
Yeah, I think when we say we take a holistic approach, it's like, even if you were to look at just one of the sectors that we work in, and let's take, the circular economy as an example. So a lot of times when you think of climate change, you don't think of clothing and apparel, right? But actually the apparel industry contributes 10% of all global emissions, which is pretty insane. And so in our portfolio, we have a number of companies that are tackling that issue. And actually for a climate week, which is something that happens every single year in New York, this past one just a few weeks ago, we partnered with a number of our companies that are working on solving for, making fast fashion less fast or slower to do a fashion show. And I think that's something that is really palatable for a lot of folks, or tangible, because climate can be a really, really hard and scary thing to just think about and like try to tackle all at once, right? But if you look at the apparel industry, we have companies that are actually taking clothing, which typically is ultra hard to recycle and just goes into our landfill, and they're breaking it down to like the polymer level, and they're actually using that to upcycle it to either like the soles of shoes or into other usable and recyclable materials. So that, and then we have like apparel on one end, and then we have, say, like hybrid electric or hydrogen electric airplanes on the other end. And we have like energy efficiency technologies like for your home and businesses. And then we also have, like water sensing technologies in this other corner. So that's kind of what we mean by we take a really holistic approach. We don't kind of like build up any firewalls between like, oh, we support this, but we don't support this, because all of it is needed to really solve for climate in the time that we have left.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like that's super interesting, and it's really good to try and make all these other different things better, and it's all going towards that same goal of helping our planet. Another question that we had was, were there any individuals along the way that really impacted your life? Do you want to tell us about how they changed your life or impacted the direction that you took in your personal or professional life?
Yeah, actually, it's really interesting that you're asking this question now, because I actually just had the opportunity to have lunch with my former mentor's husband, and it came out of an article that was recently published a month or so ago. So this person, her name is Ko Miyataki, and she was the head of the rehab hospital of the Pacific Foundation. And when I was still actually at Boston University, one summer I decided to intern at rehab hospital, and they've never really had like a business intern before. And so I was helping to build out a business plan for, they had a driver's education and rehabilitation program for folks that, maybe they suffered a spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, or something traumatic that, didn't allow them to drive like able-bodied people could typically drive without any of like the mechanisms or adaptations needed to a car. So it was a really important program, right? But it just wasn't doing so well financially. So I came in and kind of did a complete audit. And through that, I was able to build a relationship with Ko, who was the head of the foundation at the time. And, actually we made a sports bet because she was a huge LeBron James fan at the time, and I was a huge Celtics fan being in Boston. And basically before I left to go back to school was like, oh, like whoever goes farther in the playoffs, loser buys lunch next time we see each other. And so went back to school. The Celtics, I think, got really far in the playoffs that year. So Ko owed me lunch. So I came back and, we went out to lunch one day, and she offered me a job to run the marketing at rehab. And at that time, I was actually working at Bank of Hawaii in their management training program. So I was like, oh, I can't, I have to finish this program. And she was like, no, I believe in you. And I know you love rehab. So come on over. So I did. And, she really was a mentor throughout my career there. And there was even one point where, you kind of go through like these peaks and valleys, like with your work. And I think I was in like somewhat of a slump, one of these like weeks, and she pulled me into her office, and she was like, do you want to just like, what is the impact that you want to leave here? Like, do you want to just be known as the girl who made all of these brochures? And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, no. And that was like just the kick in the butt that I needed to kind of jump into overdrive. And she passed away a couple years ago, but she was such a amazing sounding board for my entire career. And I was lucky to call her a friend and mentor.
Wow, it sounds like she was a really amazing person.
Yeah, she was.
Do you have any? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna ask if you had any other stories about her that you wanted to share, or any other relationships with other mentors.
Actually, so I this past year I recently got the 40 under 40 award from PBN, and the reason why I had lunch with Ko's husband this week was because in my description I dedicated that award to her. And so someone had shared the article with him, and he shot me a text and was like, I had no idea. I didn't realize that, she had such a profound effect on your life and career. So that was really nice. And I think just really goes to show the connectivity here in Hawaii, and just the power of, building those relationships and really giving them the time and space to flourish.
Yeah, it's great to hear. So another question is, were there any skill sets or knowledge that you wish you had known when you first kind of started your career? And along the way, where or how did you kind of obtain the knowledge that you have now?
I think something that I've been saying a lot to people lately is just to give each other grace. A lot of times everything seems urgent and everything feels like it's on fire. But I think that, and a lot of deadlines are artificial. I mean, there are some that like need to be hit, but especially a lot of like internal milestones and deadlines can be just really arbitrary. And so I think like to get a little bit more of, like that feeling of balance or just humanness, I think in our roles. Oftentimes when people come to me and they're like, oh my goodness, like, I'm so sorry, like I can't get this on time. And it's like, it's okay. Like if you need another day or two, like it's totally fine. And I think like sometimes we forget to have that like human, like empathy or compassion when we're in a work setting, and I think it's something that is just so needed and can help create really, really healthy environments and relationships with the people that we're working with. So just give yourself a little bit of grace. That's my piece of advice there.
Yeah, because in like the projects and in the projects and jobs that I've been a part of, it's always easier for me to kind of like get comfortable and get into the swing of things when I know, like, I'm not expected to be perfect or to know everything, that there's a good environment for me to ask questions and learn. Because if there's like a project where they're like, oh, you should already know this, then I'm not as willing to kind of learn and reach out, and I won't kind of thrive as much. So in order to get the skills necessary, you kind of have to be comfortable, because like companies and projects are all made out of people, and people need comfort, and they need that social interaction. They need to feel welcome and loved and comforted. So yeah, that's definitely, giving each other grace is definitely a good advice that it really speaks to me.
Yeah, and especially when you're working with community, right? Like you can only work at the speed of trust. So I think in Western culture, we go into every conversation being like, there needs to be an outcome. But sometimes that outcome is just like being able to have those conversations to build more of that relationship and rapport with each other, so that hopefully something meaningful or more meaningful can come out of it.
Everything is so kind of fast these days, and we can do a whole lot more than we could years ago. But yeah, it's important to remember that efficiency isn't the only goal, and that people are, very important to pay attention to, and to show love to.
Next, we have a question from the chat. They asked, how has Elemental Accelerator's partnership with the Emerson Collective changed things?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So in 2017, we partnered with Emerson Collective. And for those of you who aren't as familiar with who they are, so it is Lorraine Powell Jobs, or Steve Jobs's widow. It's her philanthropic and investment platform. So she has a number of, issues that she focuses on and funds. And some of that is around, like social justice, around education and workforce development. And the piece where we come in is around, like the environmental sustainability resiliency piece. So that part of Emerson is actually called Elemental. So in 2017, when we formally partnered with them, we rebranded from Energy Accelerator to Elemental Accelerator. And they helped us to expand our headquarters outside of Hawaii to have a second headquarters in California, and really, really challenged us to lean more deeply into building out our work around equity and access. So our office in the Bay Area is in East Palo Alto, which is considered a frontline community, or a community that, you know, is experiencing climate change first and worst, but typically will be some of the last to benefit from any of the technology solutions that are coming to market for various reasons, mostly socioeconomic, right? But the partnership has been so amazing. Lorraine chairs our board, and just continues to push us towards, you know, like thinking more globally in how we can scale our impacts, as well as the work that we're doing. Hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. It's cool to hear about like different sectors of areas that are to be effective, and that's actually really more common than people think, where the people who are affected the most are actually the people who are last to get any of the solutions.
Yeah, those who actually bear the burden or the brunt of our social and environmental issues here.
So for our next question, so kind of the primary target audience for these seminars are college students in engineering. So kind of what is your opinion on where does education fit into the bigger picture of things in your perspective?
Oh my goodness, so important. So, you know, I truly believe that in the near future, every job will be a climate job, right? Because all the decisions that we make from here on out basically affect climate, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in accounting, whether you're in operations, strategy, whatever it is, right? And I think that with all of, you know, with especially the new IRA bill that was just announced, there's so much funding that is being infused into this space. And, you know, government policy is probably one of the biggest drivers for economies, right? So with all of this new funding, and climate tech sector had been growing before this anyways for the past like number of years, there's so much workforce development opportunity around, you know, these solutions, and it's every single part of the business, right? So it's from marketing to engineering to like human resourcing. So it's exciting. And I think that UH, you know, is doing a great job in like doing a landscape analysis of what is coming online and, you know, working with partners to plan for the future.
Great, thank you.
Okay, next question. So when you are a mentor, what would be one of the main goals for you to achieve with your mentee? And if you were the one being mentored, what would you suggest to our younger audience members to be a main goal in getting out of that relationship with your mentor?
A good question. You know, I think that the mentor-mentee relationship is really great, but I know there's like so much more talk of like the importance of like having a mentor, right? But I think that there are a lot of different definitions of what a mentor could look like. And sometimes it's like looking like to your peers to be like that sounding board, or, you know, like professors, like for your classes, or just people that you really respect. And it doesn't have to like be that like, oh, you're going to be my mentor and I'm going to like talk to you like every month now about like things that I'm thinking through. I feel like it should be like just like really fluid, right? And again, like I truly think that there's so much value in just taking a look around the room and seeing who you can lean on or who you can surround yourself with to help guide you, you know, kind of like through these next chapters that you'll go through.
Yeah, that's so true because when I was applying for college, everyone was always like, it seemed very square, the relationship between mentors and mentees. They're like, you need to find a professor who will guide you. And I'm like, that's not how it works. I feel like these are relationships, right? So they're meant to be built over time, and they're not just something that you obtain in order to get forward in your life. There's something that is a part of you and like helps you grow.
Yeah, I think the more genuine that click can feel, the better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, those conversations and calls just kind of fall flat, and no one likes that feeling.
Yeah, I've definitely benefited from kind of that fluid form of mentorship, not really like a specific, like we'll sit down at these dates and these times, but just people in my life, like my friends, their experiences and their kind of thoughts, it helps me a lot. And also like project advisors, they haven't specifically said like, I want to mentor you, but the advice that they give and kind of just the life stories they share, they're very encouraging and very helpful to me to kind of grow as a person and kind of grow in my skills as an engineer. So yeah, those fluid relationships of mentorship are very helpful.
Yeah, and I think as you enter into roles and jobs, like out there, sometimes it's other people that are within your own organization, and there are champions and there are cheerleaders, and they all play different roles in how they can support you in your career.
Yeah, one person doesn't have to be everything. There can be, a person you go to for advice and another for like just emotional encouragement, or a whole plethora of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another question, how do you maintain a healthy balance between all of your like work responsibilities and also your life outside of work, like work-life balance? Do you have any kind of particular hobbies or that help you unwind or take your mind off of things?
I watch a lot of Netflix. I think there are times, as with anything, where you're busier than other times. And in my role, a lot of my work happens, after hours, like when you're going to events and, like pauhanas and meeting people. And that can be really taxing. So I think it's just making sure that, and it doesn't have to be the same thing every day, because that can be really stressful for you when you give yourself, again, like these artificial deadlines where you're like, I need to shut my computer off at 5 p.m. and that's it. And if I don't, then I'm doing a terrible job at work-life balance, right? I think it's just being really intentional with the time that you're quarantining, for yourself, and making sure it's a healthy amount of time that you are able to spend with your family, able to spend with your friends or with your partner, or just by yourself. So sometimes planning that in and taking breaks.
Yeah, definitely. With being in college, there's like, even after the day is done, like all classes, I have to still go home and do homework. So it kind of gets busy, but scheduling kind of a few hours to just kind of not think about that and just go out with friends or do some sort of thing like that, it's very helpful for me.
Yeah, things that spark joy for you.
Okay, so next question is there one project or initiative that you worked on during your career that really sticks out to you? And what made it so important or impactful to you?
Well, I think there are a handful of those, but I think one example that I want to give is actually not something that I worked on personally, but I think is really a cool solution that's like in our portfolio that I think can have a lot of impact, that Elemental has worked on. And their technology is called Source Hydro Panels. And it looks like a solar panel, but what it does is instead of creating energy out of, sunlight, it takes the sunlight and moisture from the atmosphere and it creates clean drinking water. And if you can imagine, like, there's so many applications for that, right? Like, especially for places that, have hard to reach water sources, because like they're really rural or whatever that reason is. So we actually funded a project with Source in Queensland, Australia. And if you've ever been to Australia, the entire center of the continent is desert. Like, it's the size of the US, but basically the population there, I think, is like 25 million. So everybody lives on the coast, right? And so we funded a project that actually is the biggest array, I think, of source hydro panels that they've done to date. And typically, before those panels were installed, the only way the community could get clean drinking water was to drive in pallets and pallets of plastic water bottles, right? And this was their only source of clean drinking water. And so through this project, not only are they lessening their carbon footprint, because now you're not trucking in using fossil fuels, like all of this water, you don't have all of this waste that's going into the landfill with plastics. They've also created workforce development opportunities around it because now, or an economic driver behind it, because now they take the clean drinking water produced by the panels and they're able to bottle it in sustainable aluminum bottles and sell it to neighboring like resorts and hotels in the area. So now they have, like an entire workforce development opportunity and clean drinking water. So I think that's really like the power of a lot of these more community driven solutions around climate. And it's just super exciting, I think, to see the possibilities here in Hawaii and across the globe.
So, well, what kind of got you into the field you're in now, like the climate and energy?
Yeah, great question. This is actually my first role in the sustainability and climate space. So most of my background was in marketing and specifically working with nonprofits. So actually, I think this is a really great example of just how Hawaii is really small and really connected. And in all of my roles, I have basically been working with the same leaders at, like the organizations around Hawaii for over a decade. And basically, just like continue to take those relationships that I was stewarding for, at one point it was banking. At another point, it was around healthcare and rehabilitation when I was at the hospital. And then when I was at Anthology Marketing Group, I was talking to those same people to help them with like their marketing needs, and so all of those people, though, are also all now concerned about climate change. So we've been able to, like take those relationships and, use them now in this chapter of my life to support them in another way. And that's just, I think that just goes to show like how tight the ecosystem is here in Hawaii and how everything is really, really interconnected. So, and in my role now, it's really actually my dream role because it has combined basically all of the things that I had been working on in the past into this role. So it's a little bit of, that marketing and communications and strategy alongside, the relationship and community building piece. And then getting to work on like the education and then also like the corporate development of things. So I always say it is my dream job and I couldn't even like write the job description myself if I tried. So when Elemental approached me about this role, it was too good to be true. And it continues to be a really fun learning journey for me to lean more into this climate and sustainability space, because it's so incredibly values aligned. I just never could imagine a role that I could fit into it. And I think that's something that when I talk to a lot of students, you know, like they're able to see, because of like all the different types of, you know, companies that we work with, they're like, oh, I could slot in there. Like, I think I would really like working there, you know? So we don't really have to give up our values to be content or happy in our career or role.
It's really awesome to hear how like it all kind of, you know, everything you've done kind of is building up to where you are now. It's really cool to hear kind of how that worked out. Because like in my life too, like there's been like little things like, oh, I've done this project which has led to this internship which has led to this, and it just like all kind of goes in one direction. It's very cool to see that. And just
I'm still in
everyone's
shock,
life.
so you know.
Yeah. That's great.
So kind of leading on to that, like, were there some leading values that you had throughout your different positions that you live by? Like, what matters the most to you, like in general, like for your values, and how much of this do you integrate into your view of leadership?
Yeah, I think throughout all of my roles, team has always been super, super important. And just like feeling that there's a healthy work environment. And by healthy, I don't mean like, you know, like everyone shuts off their computer at a certain time every day, but it's that like sense of like camaraderie and trust that I think is built. And, you know, having like any sort of like difficulties with team in any setting can really make or break, you know, like a job for you, because it's like it makes you like not want to get up in the morning and things like that, right? So, you know, in looking at like roles and who I want to work with, really diving into like what is the dynamic on the team and what is the company culture, I think has been a really important thread.
Yes, for sure. Your environment will completely impact the way that you work and how like happy you are in your position. And a bad environment can totally just negate everything, even if it's something that you really like to do.
Yeah. And, you know, I tell people all the time that even working at Elemental isn't a fit for everyone. If like you really love that kind of like traditional institution and structure, probably have a really hard time at a company like Elemental, because we're a bit more fluid and we work like really quickly on some things and, you know, like take our time on other things. So to like really like reflect and take those steps back. So it really is just like looking at like what are the values and the ethos of the company, and what truly, you know, not what is on their website, but really like when you get into the interviews, like what is the company culture, like what is the body language of the people that you're interviewing with. Somebody once told me, it's like, take a look, like how tired or how much energy do your interviewers have, and that can be really telling of like what the actual, you know, company culture is like.
Yeah, from different career events that we have at the college, like some advice I've heard is that the companies aren't only choosing you, like looking at you to see if you be a good fit, you're also looking at the company to see if, you know, they're a good fit for you.
100%. And don't forget it. It's a two-way street.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's something I always need to remember when I'm going into interviews. Like, oh, you know, I need to put my best foot forward, of course, but then see if, you know, I would kind of fit with their values and their work ethic and just kind of how they structure their company. So let's see. If there was something that you know now that you could go back in time and tell your younger self when you just got out of college, what would that be?
I think it's like everything happens for a reason. You know, like sometimes you might feel like your career is like going a little sideways or you had to like take a step back, but sometimes it's those, you know, like lateral steps or backward steps that like kind of like in my example, like all the dots like feel like they've just connected, you know, like being able to look back now. So again, it's a little bit of that grace, and like it's okay. Like I think sometimes we let our ego get in the way of like, no, I can't do that, you know, but it's like there's a lot of learning that can happen sometimes from taking a step back. So it's okay.
So one, I have the last question, Tiffany. And
Oh,
so
no.
I'm just curious, and I know you can't divulge much because I know you're coming out with cohort 11 and making your announcements very soon. But is there anything in general that you can share about what we might get excited about, some of the areas that are going to be of interest and focus for the coming years with cohort 11?
Yeah. You know, I think this is a really great group. It touches everything from like farming to even like sustainable building materials, to give you a little hint, you know, and like the time horizons for some of that is still unknown because these companies are earlier stage. But, you know, like when we look at the opportunity in Hawaii for like affordable housing and things, I think that's something that's really top of mind for folks is like, how do we build more sustainably, you know, and affordably, which is the biggest thing, right? So I think there are a lot of real world applications in this next cohort that are really exciting. Because I'm going to admit, like, again, I said, like, I did not come from this space. I am not an engineer. So sometimes when you tell me about some of like the energy solutions, I'm like, oh, that sounds so interesting. But I was like, can you tell me like 5 more times so I can understand? But I think there are a lot of companies, you know, in cohort 11 that are just feel really tangible, which I think is important for, you know, the partners and community as well.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to meeting cohort 11, and I've always appreciated, you know, you folks, including, you know, folks like me from the outside in terms of, you know, helping provide a set of lenses for your reviews. And it's such an amazing growth and difference in the kinds of companies that you have attracted and have an interest in the kinds of work that you know Elemental has been pushing. And you know, so you know, I just want to say thank you, Tiffany, for your spending some time with us today and sharing your thoughts with our community, both our students, our faculty, our industry and alumni. You know, having been a part of Pictor, which helped with the birth of Energy Accelerator. And I remember back in the day when Maurice Kaya originally hired Don Lippert, and to see how far Energy Accelerator has then become an Elemental Accelerator, and the things that, you know, you folks have done in the growth is just amazing in this space. And so I applaud you for your work and your commitment to a lot of the companies and the initiatives that you do, because it is important to Hawaii. I know Elemental has expanded far beyond Hawaii, but everything that you do still kind of comes back, right, to benefiting our community. So appreciate that very much. So with that, you know, again, thank you very much, Tiffany, for sharing. I know it was a kind of a last minute thing for you to have to jump on in replacing Don. So appreciate you kind of, you know, being a good sport and helping us, you know, provide this kinds of information and experience to our students and our community. So with that, you know, I appreciate all of everybody else who's joined in. Again, you know, all of our seminars are recorded and are provided on our webpage. I know a lot of people register just so they can get the links and go and watch it after the fact. So we're looking forward to people continuing their interest in our leadership seminar series. Our next one again is December 4th. same time. Richard Sullivan, Vice President at Northrop Grumman, will be speaking to our group. This one is going to be our first hybrid, where Richard will be here in person, here on campus, but we'll also be streaming it live as well, synchronously to our audience so that people can still watch it via Zoom. So again, thank you to the Hayashida Ohana for their support. Always appreciate their interest and support of our students and our education experience for leadership, especially for engineers need to be leaders in our community. So thank you again to the Hayashida Ohana. But otherwise, I wish everybody a great weekend. Please cheer on your favorite high school teams over the weekend. Football coming to an end. So great time to be a sports fan, but even better time to be an engineer. So aloha and take care, everyone.